In the suffocating heat of a Denver summer evening, Frank Ruiz wiped the grease from his weathered hands and was about to close down his failing auto repair shop when he spotted them. A woman in an elegant designer suit, standing helplessly beside her smoking luxury sedan while her 7-year-old daughter clutched her briefcase with obvious worry. Despite having just received another past-due notice and knowing his own daughter's medical bills were mounting by the day, Frank did what his late wife had always taught him: help those in need, expecting nothing in return. He fixed their car, refused payment, and even gave the little girl a juice box from his shop's mini-fridge. He had no idea that the woman was Alexandra Winters, CEO of Winters Technologies, one of the fastest-growing software companies in Colorado. As Frank watched them drive away in his battered pickup truck that evening, he couldn't possibly know that the little girl, Lily Winters, was already convinced she'd met a real-life angel, and that her innocent words, "He's our angel, Mom," would soon turn both their worlds upside down. Could one simple act of kindness, witnessed by a determined 7-year-old, really lead to the most unexpected partnership of the year? Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. And if tales of unexpected connections touch your heart, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we've got something even more extraordinary waiting for you. The alarm clock in Frank's cramped apartment above Ruiz Auto Care buzzed at 5 a.m., same as it had every day for the past 2 years since his wife Carmen had died in a car accident. The small 3-bedroom space wasn't much to look at. Second-hand furniture, walls decorated with his 9-year-old daughter Zoe's artwork, and a kitchen table that doubled as his desk for sorting medical bills and homework help. Frank moved quietly through his morning routine, careful not to wake Zoe, who slept peacefully in her bedroom that he had painted lavender during one of his sleepless nights of grief. The living room walls told their story through photographs: Carmen's radiant smile at their wedding day, family camping trips to the Rocky Mountains when money was less tight, Zoe's various school achievements, and Frank's military service photos from before he'd returned home to help Carmen build their automotive business from the ground up. In the tiny kitchen, he started the old coffee maker, a wedding gift from Carmen's parents that wheezed and sputtered like an overworked engine. While it brewed, Frank sorted through the pile of bills that seemed to multiply overnight. The medical collection notice sat prominently on top, demanding payment for Zoe's emergency appendectomy from 6 months ago, $12,000 that might as well have been $1 million. Below that, the shop's rent notice, past due by 3 months, and below that, Zoe's asthma medication prescription that he'd been rationing to make it last longer. His fingers lingered on the electricity bill. Final notice: if he couldn't come up with $340 by Friday, they'd lose power to both the apartment and the shop. "Dad," Zoe's sleepy voice drifted from her doorway. At 9 years old, she was a perfect blend of both parents, Carmen's determined jaw and Frank's compassionate brown eyes, with curly hair that refused to be tamed. She wore her favorite pajamas, the ones with rainbows that were getting too small, but that she refused to give up. "Dad, are we going to be okay?" she asked suddenly, looking up from her cereal bowl. The question hit Frank like a wrench to the chest. "Why would you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because you've been crying at night again. I can hear you through the wall. And yesterday, when you thought I wasn't listening, you were on the phone saying we might have to move somewhere cheaper." She paused, studying Frank's face with the devastating honesty that only children possess. "And because you always say, 'we'll see,' when I ask for things now. And that's what adults say when they mean no, but don't want to hurt your feelings." Frank knelt beside her chair, taking Zoe's small hands in his rough, oil-stained ones. "Zoe, listen to me. We might not have a lot of money right now, but we have something more important. We have each other. We have our health, mostly, and we have people in this neighborhood who depend on us. That makes us rich in the ways that really matter. But will we have to leave Mommy's shop?" The innocence in her question nearly broke Frank. Zoe had overheard more than he'd thought. "Not if I have anything to say about it. This is our home, where your mommy built her dream, where she taught me everything I know about fixing cars and taking care of people. We're staying right here." After dropping Zoe off at Riverside Elementary, where she hugged Frank extra tight and whispered, "I love you, Dad, and I know Mommy would be proud of you," in his ear, Frank drove the 4 blocks to his shop. The building sat on the corner of Oakwood Street and Fifth Avenue, a modest structure with 2 bay doors that had seen better days and the hand-painted sign that Carmen had made herself. The neighborhood around it was changing rapidly, with trendy coffee shops and organic markets moving in, driving up rents and pushing out long-time residents. His appointment book was thinner than he'd like, showing only 2 jobs scheduled for the day. Mrs. Patterson needed new tires on her sedan, a job Frank had quoted at cost because he knew the retired teacher was living on a fixed income, and Carlos Rivera was bringing in his food truck for a brake inspection. Reliable work, but Carlos always paid in small installments when his business allowed. As the morning wore on, Frank worked methodically, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of diagnosis, repair, and restoration. Cars didn't lie to you. They didn't judge you based on your bank account or your zip code. They simply needed fixing, and if you had the skill and the patience, you could make them run like new again, just like Carmen had taught him. It was just after 6 p.m. when the temperature gauge in his small office hit 102 degrees Fahrenheit, typical for Denver in late July. That's when he heard it, the distinctive sound of a high-end engine in distress, followed by the slam of car doors and a woman's frustrated voice saying, "Not today. Please not today of all days." Frank wiped his hands on his shop rag and stepped outside, squinting against the blazing Colorado sun. What he saw would change everything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Outside Ruiz Auto Care, a gleaming silver Audi Q8 sat with its hood up, white steam billowing into the scorching Denver evening. Beside it stood a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a Fortune 500 boardroom, tailored charcoal blazer, perfectly styled blonde hair, and designer heels that were clearly not made for standing on hot asphalt in 102-degree weather. But it was the little girl beside her that caught Frank's attention first. Around 7 years old, with the same blonde hair as her mother, wearing a private school uniform, complete with knee-high socks despite the heat. She was holding her mother's hand and looking genuinely worried, not about the car, but about the stress lines creasing her mother's forehead. "Excuse me," the woman called out as Frank approached. "I don't suppose you're still open? I know it's past normal business hours, but we're kind of desperate here." Frank glanced at his watch. It was 6:15 p.m., and while he normally stayed open until 7, the heat had driven most sensible people indoors. "I'm open. What seems to be the problem?" "The engine just started overheating out of nowhere. We were on our way to Lily's violin lesson when steam started pouring out. I've called 4 other shops, but everyone says they can't see us until next week." The little girl, Lily, stepped forward with the kind of confidence that came from being raised to speak up for herself. "My mom's really stressed because she has a super important presentation tomorrow morning, and this is her only car. And I'm supposed to perform at the Children's Hospital benefit concert next Saturday, so I can't miss too many lessons." Frank knelt down to Lily's eye level, something he'd learned to do with Zoe. Kids deserve to be heard, not talked down to. "The Children's Hospital benefit? That's a pretty big deal. What do you play?" Lily's face lit up. "Violin. I've been practicing Bach's Minuet in G for 4 months. It's really hard, but Mom says if you work hard enough, you can do anything." She paused, then added seriously, "Mom works really, really hard." "Your mom sounds pretty smart," Frank said, looking up at the woman. "Let me take a look under the hood. I'm Frank Ruiz, by the way. Alexandra Winters, and this is my daughter, Lily. Thank you so much for staying open." As Frank examined the engine, he became aware of Alexandra watching him work, not in the way most customers did, with suspicion or impatience, but with genuine interest. She asked intelligent questions about what he was looking for, and when Lily started getting restless in the heat, Alexandra quickly moved her into the shade of the shop's overhang. "It's your cooling system," Frank announced after 15 minutes of diagnosis. "The radiator hose has a small tear which is causing the coolant to leak out. That's why it's overheating. The good news is, it's a relatively simple fix, and you caught it before any real engine damage occurred." Alexandra's relief was visible. "How long will it take, and what's this going to cost me?" About 45 minutes for the repair. Frank paused, running quick mental calculations. The hose would cost him about $35 wholesale, and the labor would normally run another $90. But something about this woman and her daughter reminded him of his own situation, doing the best they could, facing unexpected challenges, trying to keep important commitments. "Tell you what," he said, surprising himself, "let me get you fixed up, and we'll worry about payment after I get you back on the road." Alexandra's eyebrows raised. "I couldn't ask you to do that. I can pay." "I'm sure you can," Frank said gently, "but right now you've got a little girl who needs to get to violin lessons, and it's hotter than a furnace out here. Let's focus on getting you two somewhere air-conditioned." Lily tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mom, he's nice, like the mechanic man in my storybook, the one who helps everyone in the village fix their cars." Alexandra looked down at her daughter, then back at Frank. "Are you sure? I don't want to take advantage." "No advantage taken," Frank assured her. "Come on inside, where it's cool. I've got some cold drinks in the mini-fridge, and Lily can tell me more about this Bach piece while I work." The interior of Ruiz Auto Care was a stark contrast to its modest exterior. Every surface was immaculately clean, tools organized with military precision, and the air conditioning, while clearly an older unit, provided blessed relief from the Colorado heat. Lily immediately gravitated toward a bulletin board covered with photos of customers and their families, while Alexandra took in the various certificates and commendations covering the walls. "Military veteran?" she asked, noting Frank's Army service photos. "3 tours in Iraq," Frank replied, pulling on his work gloves. "Came home when my wife needed help building this place from the ground up." While Frank worked, Lily peppered him with questions about cars, engines, and tools. She was bright, curious, and reminded Frank strongly of Zoe at that age, always wanting to understand how things worked. Alexandra, meanwhile, seemed to relax for the first time since they'd arrived, settling into the small customer waiting area and actually smiling as she watched her daughter's animated conversation. "You're really good with kids," Alexandra observed. "Do you have children?" "A daughter," Frank said, his face softening. "Zoe. She's 9. Loves to help out in the shop when I let her, though mostly she just reorganizes my tools and asks why cars can't run on happiness instead of gasoline." "Sounds familiar," Alexandra laughed. "Mom's company helps doctors help people better," Lily added, proudly. "She says everyone deserves good health care, even if they don't have lots of money." "Smart kid," Frank said, meaning it. "And your mom's right. Healthcare should be about healing, not bank accounts." 35 minutes later, Frank lowered the Audi's hood and wiped his hands on his shop rag. "All set. The new hose should solve your overheating problem completely. I'd recommend keeping an eye on your coolant levels, but you shouldn't have any more issues." Alexandra pulled out her designer wallet. "What do I owe you?" Frank hesitated. The parts had cost him $37, and he desperately needed every cent with the electricity bill due Friday. But looking at Lily's hopeful face, and thinking about his own daughter practicing violin at Mrs. Henderson's house because they couldn't afford private lessons, he made a decision that his logical mind said was foolish. "Consider it a good luck gift for Lily's performance at the benefit," he said. "Just promise me you'll take care of that car. German engineering is solid when it's maintained properly." Alexandra stared at him in disbelief. "I can't let you do that. The parts alone must have cost—" "Sometimes," Frank interrupted gently, "the best payment is knowing I helped someone get where they needed to go." Lily suddenly broke free from her mother and wrapped her arms around Frank's waist in an impulsive hug. "Thank you, Mr. Frank. You're like an angel who fixes cars instead of having wings." Over her daughter's head, Alexandra's eyes met Frank's, and something passed between them. A moment of connection that neither had expected. "This is incredibly generous," Alexandra said softly. "How can we repay this kindness?" "Just pay it forward someday," Frank replied, his standard answer. But as he watched them drive away, Lily waving enthusiastically from the back window, he had no idea that his simple act of kindness had just set in motion a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. Back in the Audi, Lily was already formulating her plan. "Mom, I think Mr. Frank would be a really good friend for us. Maybe even more than a friend." 3 days had passed since the Audi incident, and life at Ruiz Auto Care had returned to its familiar rhythm of financial stress and mechanical problems. Frank had managed to complete Mrs. Patterson's tire installation and Carlos's brake inspection, earning just enough to keep the electricity on for another week. The medical collection notice still sat prominently on his kitchen table, a constant reminder that he had 27 days before the debt collectors could place a lien on the shop. Zoe's asthma had been acting up again, triggered by the unusual heat wave that had settled over Denver like a heavy blanket. Frank had been rationing the medication, giving Zoe half doses, and praying it would be enough until he could afford the refill. The prescription sat on his workbench, mocking him with its $180 price tag, money he simply didn't have. He was under the hood of a 2018 Honda Civic, diagnosing what sounded like a transmission issue, when he heard the unmistakable sound of multiple vehicles pulling into his lot. The engines were too quiet and smooth to be his usual customers' cars, and there were definitely more than one. Wiping his hands on his shop rag, Frank emerged from the bay to find a sight that made him question whether the heat was making him hallucinate. 3 black Mercedes SUVs were parked in his small lot, their tinted windows reflecting the afternoon sun like mirrors. The vehicles looked like something from a presidential motorcade, sleek, expensive, and completely out of place in his working-class neighborhood. A small crowd was already gathering. Mrs. Patterson from the apartment complex next door was standing in her doorway, cell phone in hand. The teenagers from the corner bodega had abandoned their afternoon hangout spot to get a closer look. Even Carlos had stepped out of his food truck, wiping his hands on his apron. The rear door of the middle SUV opened, and Lily Winters practically bounced out, wearing a bright purple dress and carrying what looked like a handmade poster. Behind her, Alexandra emerged more slowly. But today she looked different. Gone was the stressed executive from 3 days ago. Instead, she wore casual jeans, a crisp white blouse, and comfortable flats that were actually appropriate for the Colorado heat. "Mr. Frank!" Lily called out, running toward him with the enthusiasm only children could muster. "We came back! Mom said we had to wait a few days to make sure the car was really fixed, but I told her you were magic with engines." Alexandra approached more cautiously, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Hello, Frank. I hope you don't mind us dropping by unannounced, but Lily has been talking about you non-stop for 3 days. I think she's convinced you're some kind of automotive guardian angel." "Just doing my job," Frank replied, glancing around at the growing crowd of curious neighbors. "How's the Audi running?" "Perfectly," Alexandra replied. "Not a single problem. Which is actually why we're here." She paused, glancing around at the gathering crowd. "Would it be possible to talk inside? What I have to discuss is a bit unusual." Inside the blessed coolness of his shop, Lily immediately went to the bulletin board of customer photos, while Alexandra seemed to be studying the space with new eyes. She examined Frank's certifications, ran her fingers along the tool organization system, and nodded approvingly at the cleanliness and efficiency of the workspace. "You know," she said finally, "I've had my car serviced at some of the most expensive shops in Cherry Hills, paid premium prices for what they called premium service. But I've never had anyone take such obvious pride in their work or treat us with such genuine kindness." Lily spun around from the photo board. "Mom, look! He has pictures of all the families he's helped, just like in my story about the village mechanic who becomes everyone's hero." Alexandra moved to look at the photos Lily was pointing out. Dozens of smiling faces next to their repaired vehicles, families celebrating getting their car back, elderly couples grateful for reliable transportation, young parents relieved to have safe vehicles for their children. "These aren't just customers," Alexandra observed softly. "They're your community." "Always have been," Frank confirmed. "Carmen taught me that when you fix someone's car, you're fixing their ability to get to work, take their kids to school, visit family. It's never just about the machine." Lily pulled on her mother's arm. "Mom, show him the poster." Alexandra looked slightly embarrassed. "Lily made something for you," She insisted we bring it. Lily unrolled her homemade poster with obvious pride. In colorful markers and a child's handwriting, it read, "Thank you, Mr. Frank. You're our guardian angel." Below the text was a drawing of a man in coveralls standing next to a car, with a woman and little girl smiling beside him. What made Frank's throat tight was the detail. Lily had drawn the man mechanic with another little girl, clearly meant to be Zoe. "Lily," Frank managed, "this is beautiful. Thank you. I drew your daughter too, even though I haven't met her yet. Mom told me about her. Maybe she could come to my violin recital next Saturday if she likes music." Alexandra's cheeks flushed pink. "Lily, we talked about this in the car. You can't just invite people to it. Why not? She helped us when we needed help, and now we should help him when he needs help. That's what you always tell me about being kind." Frank looked between mother and daughter, sensing an undercurrent he didn't quite understand. "Help with what?" Alexandra took a deep breath. "Lily has been researching you online, and by researching, I mean she Googled your shop and found some things that concerned her." Lily nodded seriously. "Your website hasn't been updated in forever, and there's a newspaper article about how all the old businesses in this neighborhood are being forced out by developers. And your shop doesn't show up on any of the fancy car service websites, which Mom says means you're probably not making enough money to advertise properly." Frank felt his stomach drop. He'd forgotten about that article in the Denver Business Chronicle from 2 months ago, highlighting the gentrification pressures facing longtime neighborhood businesses. And Lily was right about the advertising. He couldn't afford to be listed on the premium automotive service platforms. "Lily, that's not really something for you to worry about," Frank said gently.
"But it is," Lily said passionately. "You saved our day when we were in trouble. Now we want to save yours." Alexandra stepped forward, her executive confidence returning. "Frank, I don't know if you realize this, but Winters Technologies has been looking for a new automotive partner, someone to maintain our company fleet, handle repairs for our employees' personal vehicles, maybe even consult on transportation logistics for our healthcare clients." Frank blinked. "I'm not sure I follow." "What I'm saying is that I'd like to offer Ruiz Auto Care an exclusive service contract. Guaranteed monthly income, steady work, and enough of a retainer to help with your immediate financial pressures." The shop fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioner. Frank looked at Alexandra, then at Lily's hopeful face, then back to Alexandra. "Why would you do that? You barely know me." Lily piped up before her mother could answer. "Because Mom says you're the kind of person who makes the world better." She paused, glancing at her mother with a mischievous smile. "And because I think you and Mom would make really good friends, maybe even more than friends." "Lily!" Alexandra gasped, her face turning crimson. "I'm just saying," Lily said innocently, "because you both smile the same way when you talk about helping people, and isn't that what matters?" Frank stood up, meeting Alexandra's embarrassed but amused gaze. "She's got a point. I do feel optimistic when I talk to you, and if you're serious about the business contract, I'd love to discuss it. But Lily," he looked down at the little girl, "no more matchmaking schemes, okay? Your mom and I can figure out our own friendship." Lily grinned triumphantly. "Deal, but can Zoe still come to my recital as friends?" Alexandra looked at Frank hopefully. "Actually, I'd love to meet your daughter, and the invitation to the recital is genuine. Lily's performing at a benefit concert for Children's Hospital Colorado. It's next Saturday evening at the Betcher Concert Hall." "Zoe would love that," Frank said, meaning it. "She's been wanting to learn violin, actually. Maybe Lily could give her some tips." "Really?" Lily's eyes lit up. "What kind of music does she like?" "Everything. She's got this old keyboard that was her mom's, and she plays by ear. No formal training, but she's got natural talent." Lily turned to her mother with pleading eyes. "Mom, can we invite Zoe to come to my violin lesson sometime, please?" Alexandra met Frank's surprised gaze. "If it's not too presumptuous, we'd love to have Zoe join us sometime. Lily's teacher always says music is better when it's shared." Frank felt something shift in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer heat outside. For the first time in months, someone was offering not just help, but genuine friendship. I think Zoe would be thrilled to have some new friends who understand music. As they prepared to leave, Frank hugged Lily again, this time whispering in his ear, "I'm not matchmaking anymore, I promise. But I still think you and Mom laugh the same way when you're happy." Walking them to their SUVs, Frank caught Alexandra's arm gently. "Was she serious about you researching me?" Alexandra's cheeks flushed again. "Lily was serious about researching you. I may have supervised. And what I found was a man who's been quietly helping his community for years, who puts his daughter first no matter what, and has a reputation for integrity that's apparently legendary in this neighborhood. And that made you want to offer me a business contract. That made me want to get to know you better," Frank said quietly. "The business contract is legitimate. We really do need automotive services. But Lily's right about one thing. I haven't felt this hopeful about anything in a very long time." As the SUVs pulled away, Frank stood in his parking lot, Lily's poster clutched in his hand, watching until they disappeared around the corner. Mrs. Patterson approached from her apartment complex, grinning widely. "That woman likes you," she said in her matter-of-fact way. "Mrs. Patterson, and her daughter? She's already planning your future together." Frank laughed despite himself. "It's not like that." "No?" Mrs. Patterson smiled knowingly. "Then why are you smiling like that?" Frank touched his face, surprised to realize he was indeed smiling. For the first time in months, the future felt like it might hold something other than struggle and worry. Tomorrow, he could call Alexandra about the business contract. Next weekend, Zoe would experience live classical music at a real concert hall. And somewhere in between was the intriguing possibility of getting to know Alexandra Winters better. Maybe Lily was on to something after all. Monday morning arrived with the sharp reality of Frank's financial situation. He awoke at 4:30 a.m., his mind racing through calculations he'd been avoiding. The electricity bill sat on his kitchen counter, paid for one more week, but barely. Zoe's medication prescription lay beside it, still unfilled. The medical collection agency had called twice over the weekend, their automated messages growing more insistent about the $12,000 debt. Frank moved quietly through his morning routine, checking on Zoe, who slept peacefully, despite the wheeze in her breathing that had worsened overnight. In the kitchen, he opened the nearly empty medicine bottle. 3 doses left, maybe 4 if he continued cutting them in half. The choice between Zoe's health and keeping the lights on shouldn't exist. But here it was, staring him in the face every morning. His phone buzzed with a text from Alexandra. "Good morning. Would 10 a.m. work for you to discuss the partnership details? I can come to your shop if that's more convenient."
Frank stared at the message, torn between hope and skepticism. In his experience, offers that seemed too good to be true usually were, but Lily's poster was still taped to his office wall, and something about Alexandra's genuine interest in his work had felt different from the empty promises he'd heard before. He was responding to Alexandra's text when Mrs. Patterson knocked urgently on his apartment door. Frank opened it to find his elderly neighbor in her bathrobe, keys in hand, and panic written across her face. "Frank, thank God you're up. My car won't start, and I have to get to my dialysis appointment by 8. The medical transport service had a cancellation, and if I miss this session—" Mrs. Patterson's voice broke. At 73, she relied on the treatments 3 times a week to stay alive. "Let me grab my tools," Frank said without hesitation. "We'll get you there." In the parking lot behind the apartment complex, Frank quickly diagnosed the problem. Mrs. Patterson's 12-year-old Honda had a dead battery, probably killed by the heat wave and her habit of leaving the radio on. A simple jump wouldn't be enough. The battery was completely shot. "How much will a new battery cost?" Mrs. Patterson asked, her Social Security check always stretched thin. Frank did quick math. A quality battery would run about $120, installation another $40, money Mrs. Patterson didn't have, and money Frank desperately needed for Zoe's medication. He looked at his neighbor's worried face, thinking about what Carmen would have done. "Don't worry about the cost right now," Frank said, loading a battery from his emergency stock into his truck. "Let's focus on getting you to your appointment." As he installed the new battery, Mrs. Patterson grabbed his hand. "Frank, I can't afford this right now. My medication costs went up again and—" "Mrs. Patterson," Frank interrupted gently, "Carmen used to say that some things are more important than money. Your health is one of them. We'll figure out payment later." The Honda started immediately. Mrs. Patterson had tears in her eyes as she backed out of the parking space. "Your wife was right about you, Frank. You've got a heart bigger than Colorado." Frank was cleaning up his tools when his phone rang. Alexandra's name appeared on the screen. "Frank, I'm so sorry to call this early, but I have a situation. My regular mechanic can't see me until Thursday, and my car is making a grinding noise that started this morning. I have 3 critical meetings today, including one with our biggest client. Is there any chance—" "Bring it over," Frank said. "I'll take a look." "Are you sure? I know you're probably booked solid. Just come by. We'll figure it out." 20 minutes later, Alexandra's Audi pulled into the shop, the grinding noise clearly audible even from inside the building. Frank stepped outside to greet her, noting that Alexandra looked stressed despite her composed exterior. She wore a navy blue power suit that probably cost more than Frank made in a month, but her hair was slightly disheveled and worry lines creased her forehead. "It started when I was backing out of my driveway, and then it got progressively worse on the drive over," Alexandra explained as Frank popped the hood. Lily emerged from the back seat, wearing her school uniform and carrying a violin case. "Mr. Frank, Mom was panicking all morning about being late for her super important meeting." "Lily, I wasn't panicking," Alexandra protested. "You were muttering about backup plans and calling 3 different car services. That's mom code for panicking." Frank found himself smiling despite the early morning chaos. "Well, let's see what we can do about that." He began his examination, quickly identifying the problem. "It's your brake pads. They're completely worn down, and the grinding is metal on metal. You shouldn't drive this car anywhere until it's fixed." Alexandra's face went pale. "How long will that take? I have a presentation at 11 that could break or make our latest contract." Frank checked his watch. It was 8:45 a.m. Under normal circumstances, a brake pad replacement took about 2 hours, sometimes more if complications arose. But he could see the desperation in Alexandra's eyes, the same look he had when his world was falling apart. "Give me 90 minutes," Frank said, already mentally reorganizing his day. "I'll have you back on the road by 10:15. "Frank, that's impossible. You can't just—" "Lily, does your school have a breakfast program?" "Yes, why?" "Because your mom is going to drive my truck to drop you off, then come back here to wait while I work on her car. The breakfast program will make sure you're fed, and your mom will still make her meeting." Alexandra looked bewildered. I can't drive your truck. What if something happens to it?" "Then I'll fix it," Frank said simply. "But right now, you need transportation, and I need to get started on your brakes." As Alexandra reluctantly took the keys to Frank's battered pickup, Lily grabbed Frank's arm. "Mr. Frank, why are you helping us again? We haven't even talked about paying you for last time." The question caught Frank off guard. He looked at this intelligent 7-year-old who saw the world with such clarity, and then at Alexandra, who was trying so hard to manage everything perfectly. "Lily, do you remember what you said about me being an angel?" Lily nodded seriously. "Well, angels don't help people because they expect something back. They help because that's what angels do. And sometimes when you help other people, you remember that you're stronger than you thought you were."
After they left for the school, Frank threw himself into the brake repair with focused intensity. He called his other appointments to reschedule, explaining that he had an emergency. Carlos was understanding. He'd been in similar situations with his food truck. Mrs. Patterson offered to help however she could, despite her own health concerns. As Frank worked, he found himself thinking about Alexandra's panic that morning. This was a woman who ran a technology company who probably dealt with million-dollar decisions regularly. but the prospect of missing one meeting had rattled her completely. Frank understood that pressure, the weight of knowing that other people depended on your success. Alexandra returned from the school drop-off looking more frazzled than before. "Your truck has no air conditioning, the radio only picks up country music, and I think the passenger window is held up with duct tape." "Welcome to my world," Frank said, not looking up from his work. "Coffee's fresh, if you want some." For the next hour, Alexandra sat in the customer area making phone calls and working on her laptop. Frank was aware of her presence, the way she paced when she was on important calls, how she unconsciously hummed when she was concentrating, the fact that she said please and thank you to everyone she spoke with, even during tense negotiations. "You know," Alexandra said during a break in her calls, "I've been watching you work, and I'm amazed by your precision. Every movement is purposeful." Carmen used to say that cars could tell if you respected them. Sloppy work leads to dangerous failures. I've never forgotten that. She sounds like she was a wise woman. She was the best person I ever known. Built this place with her own hands, taught me everything about automotive repair and about treating people right. Frank paused in his work. She died in a car accident caused by someone else's sloppy brake work. Never got to see her dream fully realized. Alexandra was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry that you're still carrying that burden alone." At exactly 10:10 a.m., Frank lowered the Audi's lift and wiped his hands clean. "All set. New brake pads, new rotors, and I checked your brake fluid while I was at it. You're good to go." Alexandra stood up, reaching for her purse. "What do you owe me? And please don't tell me nothing again." Frank calculated quickly. Parts cost him $160, and the labor should have been at least $200 for emergency service. But looking at Alexandra's relieved face, he made the same choice he'd made 3 days ago. "Let's call it even for now. You can buy me coffee sometime, and we'll discuss that business partnership you mentioned." "Frank, I can't keep letting you do this. It's not fair to you." "Life's not fair," Frank said simply. "But that doesn't mean we can't be kind to each other." Alexandra impulsively hugged him, a gesture that surprised them both. "Thank you. You just saved my entire day, possibly my entire quarter." As Alexandra drove away to her meeting, Frank realized something had shifted. He'd spent the morning helping people who needed him, using his skills to solve real problems, making choices based on his values rather than his bank account. For the first time since Carmen's death, he felt like himself again. Not just a man struggling to survive, but a mechanic who made a difference in people's lives. His phone buzzed with a text from Alexandra. "Made it with 5 minutes to spare. Presentation went perfectly. Thank you for reminding me what real partnership looks like." Frank smiled, thinking about Carmen's voice whispering in the morning breeze. "When you fix what's broken, Frank, you fix more than just machines. Sometimes you fix everything." Wednesday evening found Frank sitting at his kitchen table staring at a business card Alexandra had left behind during her emergency brake repair. Alexandra Winters, CEO, Winters Technologies, was embossed in elegant silver lettering on thick cardstock that probably cost more than Frank's monthly grocery budget. He'd been holding on to it for 2 days, unsure whether to call about the partnership opportunity or let it fade into another what-if story. Zoe sat across from him, working on homework while occasionally glancing at the inhaler Frank had finally been able to refill. The medication had cost $180, money he'd taken from his emergency fund, leaving him with exactly $23 until Friday's paycheck from Mrs. Patterson's battery replacement. "Dad, you've been staring at that card forever," Zoe observed, looking up from her math worksheet. "Are you going to call the nice lady or just keep making that worried face?" Frank set the card down, surprised by his daughter's directness. "What nice lady?" "The one with the fancy car and the daughter who plays violin. You told me about them yesterday when you were explaining why we might be able to afford violin lessons soon." Zoe's eyes lit up. "Is she really going to give you a job?" "It's complicated, sweetheart. She offered to discuss a business partnership, but I'm not sure if it's real or just politeness." Zoe frowned with the logic only children possessed. "Why would someone be polite by lying about giving you work? That doesn't make sense." Before Frank could answer, his phone rang. Alexandra's name appeared on the screen as if summoned by their conversation. "Frank, I hope I'm not calling too late. Lily has been pestering me all day about when we're going to visit your shop again, and I realized I never properly followed up on our business partnership discussion. Actually, I was just looking at your business card, wondering if I should call you. Well, perfect timing then. Are you free tomorrow night? I'd love to take you and Zoe to dinner and show you what Winters Technologies actually does. Full transparency before we discuss any business arrangements."
Frank hesitated. Dinner sounded dangerously close to a date, and he wasn't sure he was ready for that complexity. "Alexandra, I appreciate the offer, but I should probably just review any contract documents you want to send over." "Frank, I understand your caution, but I'm not asking you to sign anything tomorrow. I'm asking you to let Lily and me take you and Zoe somewhere nice so you can see exactly what kind of company you'd potentially be partnering with. Think of it as due diligence." Zoe had been listening shamelessly to the conversation. She grabbed the phone from Frank's hand before he could stop her. "Hi, Miss Alexandra. This is Zoe. Dad's being weird about going to dinner because he thinks fancy restaurants are too expensive and he doesn't want to feel embarrassed about not knowing which fork to use." "Zoe!" Frank gasped, reaching for the phone. Alexandra's laughter came through clearly. "Well, Zoe, that's easily solved. We'll go somewhere with only one fork per person. How does that sound?" "Perfect. Dad loves Italian food, and he's really good at not spilling sauce on himself when he concentrates." After Frank retrieved the phone and made dinner plans for Thursday evening, Zoe returned to her homework with a satisfied expression. "See, Dad? Easy. Now you can find out if she's really nice or just pretending to be nice." Thursday evening arrived with Frank standing in front of his closet, realizing he had nothing appropriate for dinner with a CEO. His wardrobe consisted of work clothes, casual clothes, and one black suit he'd worn to Carmen's funeral. Zoe appeared in the doorway wearing her best dress, a navy blue outfit with white flowers that she'd outgrown but refused to give up. "You look beautiful, baby," Frank said, smoothing Zoe's curls. "You look worried." "Dad, she invited us to dinner, not to a job interview. Just be yourself." 20 minutes later, Alexandra's Audi pulled up outside their building. But when they stepped outside, Frank was surprised to see Alexandra dressed casually, in dark jeans and a soft green sweater that brought out her eyes. Lily bounced out of the car wearing a sundress and immediately ran to hug Zoe. "We're going to Mama Rosa's. Mom says they have the best garlic bread in Denver, and the owner lets kids help make their own pizza if they ask nicely." Alexandra caught Frank's questioning look. "Family-owned Italian place that's been in the same location for 30 years. Antonio, the owner, treats everyone like they're his grandchildren. I thought it might be more comfortable than some stuffy corporate restaurant." The drive to Mama Rosa's took them through downtown Denver, past the gleaming towers of the financial district where Winters Technologies was housed. Frank found himself staring up at the buildings, trying to imagine Alexandra in that world of boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. "That's Mom's building," Lily said, following Frank's gaze. "The tall one with the blue glass? She has an office on the 23rd floor with windows that look out over the whole city." "Do you like going to work with your mom?" "Sometimes. Everyone there is really nice, but they all wear serious faces and talk about numbers a lot. Mom says I'm the only person in the building who asks why the elevator music is so boring." Alexandra glanced at Frank through the rearview mirror. "Lily keeps me grounded. The corporate world can make you forget that business is ultimately about helping real people solve real problems." Mama Rosa's was everything Alexandra had promised. Warm, welcoming, and filled with the aroma of garlic and fresh basil. Antonio greeted Alexandra like family, immediately ushering them to a corner table with red checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. "Alexandra, Bella, and who are these beautiful ladies you bring to me?" "Alexandra, this is Frank Ruiz and his daughter Zoe. Frank is the mechanic I was telling you about, the one who fixed my car when I was stranded." "Ah, the guardian angel mechanic. Alexandra has been talking about you for days. She says you have hands that can fix anything and a heart that fixes even more." Over dinner, Frank began to see a different side of Alexandra. Away from the stress of emergency car repairs and business discussions, she was relaxed, funny, and completely devoted to Lily. She helped Zoe and Lily design their pizzas, told stories about her own childhood in small-town Colorado, and asked genuine questions about Frank's military service and his dreams for the shop. I grew up in a town called Millfield, about 2 hours south of here. Population 800, one grocery store, and a gas station that doubled as the town's social center. My dad was a high school math teacher, my mom ran the local library. What made you want to start a technology company? Watching my parents struggle with bureaucracy. Dad spent hours every week filling out state education reports by hand. Mom had to track library books with index cards because the town couldn't afford a computer system. I knew technology could make their lives easier, but nobody was creating solutions for small communities. Lily looked up from her pizza creation. Mom started her company to help people like Grandpa Joe and Grandma Ruth. She says big companies only want to help other big companies. That's not entirely true, she corrected gently, but it's true that small communities often get overlooked by major technology providers. That's why Winters Technologies focuses on healthcare systems and small municipalities, places that need good technology but can't afford enterprise-level pricing. As the evening progressed, Frank found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in months. Zoe and Lily had become instant friends, giggling over shared secrets and planning elaborate scenarios for future playdates. Alexandra was nothing like the stressed executive Frank had first met. She was warm, down to earth, and clearly devoted to making sure everyone felt included in the conversation. "Tell me about your shop's history," Alexandra said over dessert. "How did you and your wife build it?" Frank found himself sharing stories he hadn't told anyone since Carmen's death. How they'd started with one bay and a dream, how Carmen had insisted on treating every customer like family, how they'd slowly built a reputation for honest work and fair prices. He talked about the neighborhood, the regulars who became friends, the satisfaction of solving mechanical puzzles that stumped other shops. Carmen always said that fixing cars was just the surface, Frank explained. What we were really doing was giving people their independence back, their ability to get to work, take their kids to school, visit family. Every repair was about preserving someone's connection to their community. Alexandra listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed she understood the deeper meaning behind Frank's work. When Frank mentioned his struggles with medical debts and the pressure from developers, Alexandra's expression grew serious. "Frank, I want to be completely transparent with you about something. Winters Technologies has been looking for an automotive partner for 6 months. We've interviewed established shops in Cherry Hills and downtown, companies with impressive facilities and corporate contracts. But after watching you work, seeing how you treat people, understanding your philosophy about community service, I realized we were asking the wrong questions." "What do you mean?" "We were focused on finding a vendor who could service our fleet efficiently. What we actually need is a partner who understands that transportation is about human dignity, someone who'll treat our employees' car troubles with the same care they'd give their own family." She paused, meeting Frank's eyes. "That's not something you can learn from a business school textbook." Zoe, who had been listening while pretending to focus on her gelato, suddenly spoke up. "Miss Alexandra, are you going to help my dad save Mommy's shop?" The directness of the question hung in the air. Alexandra looked at Zoe, then at Frank, her expression thoughtful. "Zoe, I hope your dad will let me try, but more than that, I hope he'll help me build something that would make your mommy proud." On the drive home, Lily fell asleep against Zoe's shoulder while Zoe stared out the window at the city lights. Frank found himself studying Alexandra's profile as she drove, noting the concentration in her expression, the way she unconsciously hummed along with the radio. "Thank you for tonight," Frank said as they pulled up to his building. "I haven't felt that normal in a long time." Normal? Like just a person having dinner with friends, instead of a struggling single father trying to keep everything from falling apart. Alexandra turned to face him, her expression serious. "Frank, I need you to know that you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. But strength doesn't mean you have to carry everything alone. As Frank carried a sleeping Zoe up to their apartment, he realized something fundamental had shifted. For the first time since Carmen's death, he could imagine a future that included not just survival, but genuine partnership and maybe even happiness. The question was whether he was brave enough to reach for it. Saturday morning arrived with Frank feeling more optimistic than he had in months. The dinner at Mama Rosa's had shifted something fundamental in his perspective about Alexandra and her offer. For the first time since Carmen's death, he found himself considering a future that extended beyond mere survival. He was organizing his tools for the day's work when his phone buzzed with a text from Alexandra. "Good morning. Lily insisted I ask if you and Zoe would like to join us for lunch today. She wants to show Zoe her violin studio before tonight's concert. No pressure, but she's been practicing her 'please, Dad, say yes' face all morning." Frank smiled, picturing Lily's determined expression. He was about to respond when Zoe appeared in the shop doorway, still in her pajamas but wide awake. "Dad, was that Miss Alexandra? Because I heard your phone make the happy beep sound, and you only smile like that when she texts you." "How do you know what my happy beep sounds like?" "Because you changed your text tone after she started messaging you. Before, your phone just made regular boring sounds. Now it plays that little musical note." I realized she was right. I'd unconsciously assigned Alexandra a special ringtone without even thinking about it. "Would you like to have lunch with them today? Lily wants to show you her music studio." "Really? Can we go? Please? I've never seen a real music studio before." 2 hours later, they found themselves standing outside a beautiful brick building in downtown Denver that housed the Colorado Youth Music Academy. Alexandra and Lily were waiting by the entrance, both dressed casually but somehow still looking elegant. Lily wore a flowing skirt and carried her violin case, while Alexandra had chosen jeans and a soft sweater that made her look more approachable than her usual business attire. "Mr. Frank, Zoe!" Lily called out, running to meet them. "Wait until you see the practice rooms. They have pianos and everything." "Everything?" Frank asked with mock seriousness. "Even music stands?" "Especially music stands," Lily replied, giggling. "Mom says music stands are very important for proper posture."
As they entered the building, Frank was struck by the atmosphere. Unlike the corporate sterility he'd expected, the space felt warm and creative. Students of various ages moved through the hallways carrying instruments, and the sound of practice sessions created a gentle symphony of learning. "This is where Lily has been studying for the past 2 years," Alexander explained as they walked down a corridor lined with practice rooms. "The academy focuses on building confidence as much as technical skill. They believe music should be joyful, not stressful." Through the glass doors of the practice rooms, Frank could see young musicians working with their instructors. A teenage boy was playing cello with intense concentration, while next door, a girl about Zoe's age was learning basic piano scales. "Miss Alexandra," Zoe said quietly, "do you think I could ever learn to play like that?" "I think you could learn to play even better," Alexandra replied seriously. "But more importantly, I think you'd love the way music makes you feel when you're creating it." Lily grabbed Zoe's hand. "Come on, I'll show you my practice room. Mr. Frank, you and Mom can talk about boring grown-up stuff while we explore." "Lily," Alexander protested, "that's not very polite." "It's okay," Frank said, amused. "We probably do sound boring when we talk about business contracts." As the girls disappeared into one of the practice rooms, Frank found himself alone with Alexandra in the hallway. She seemed more relaxed here than anywhere else he'd seen her, as if the creative environment brought out a different side of her personality. "This place is incredible," Frank said, watching through the window as Lily began showing Zoe how to hold her violin. "How did you find it?" "Trial and error, mostly. When Lily first expressed interest in music, I made the mistake of enrolling her in a very prestigious, very expensive program that focused entirely on competition and perfection." Alexandra's expression grew thoughtful. She came home in tears after her third lesson, convinced she wasn't good enough to continue. "What changed?" "I realized I was imposing my own ideas about success onto her passion.
She didn't need to become a professional musician. She needed to fall in love with music. Alexandra gestured toward the practice room where Lily was now helping Zoe attempt a simple bow technique. This place understands that music is about expression, not just technical achievement. Frank watched Zoe's face light up as she managed to produce a clear note from Lily's violin. I've been worried about affording violin lessons for her. She's shown so much interest, but private instruction is expensive. Frank, I hope you won't take this the wrong way, but cost shouldn't be the factor that prevents Zoe from pursuing her interests. Alexandra paused, choosing her words carefully. The partnership I've been discussing with you isn't charity. It's a legitimate business opportunity that would provide you with the financial stability to give Zoe the opportunities she deserves. I know you keep saying that, but I still don't understand why you'd choose my shop over larger, more established businesses. Alexandra was quiet for a moment, watching their daughters through the practice room window. Can I tell you something personal? Frank nodded. Before I started Winters Technologies, I worked for a large corporate consulting firm. We had impressive offices, prestigious clients, and all the markers of success. But every project was about maximizing profit margins and minimizing human costs. We'd recommend laying off workers to increase shareholder value or replacing local suppliers with cheaper overseas alternatives. That sounds like most big companies. It was exactly like most big companies, and I was miserable. When I finally left to start my own business, I promised myself that every decision would be guided by one question. Does this make people's lives better? And you think partnering with me would make people's lives better? I think partnering with you would make my employees' lives better. I think it would make your community's lives better. And I think it would make my life better too. Alexandra's voice grew softer. Frank, I've been running a successful company for 5 years, but I've never met anyone who understands that business should be about human dignity the way you do. Through the practice room window, they could see Lily teaching Zoe a simple melody. Zoe's concentration was absolute, her face serious as she tried to replicate the notes Lily was demonstrating. She's a natural, Alexandra observed. Look at how quickly she's picking up the finger positions. Miss Carmen always said Zoe had musical instincts. She used to play piano, and Zoe would sit beside her on the bench, trying to copy the melodies by ear. Would you consider letting Zoe take lessons here, as part of our partnership discussion, I mean? I'd love for Lily to have a practice partner, and the Academy offers excellent financial assistance programs. Frank felt a familiar tension between pride and practicality. He wanted to provide for Zoe himself, but he also couldn't deny her opportunities because of his own limitations. What exactly would this partnership look like, in practical terms? Alexandra pulled out her phone and showed him a document. I had my team draft a preliminary proposal after our dinner Thursday night. Winters Technologies would contract with Ruiz Auto Care as our exclusive automotive services provider. We'd guarantee a minimum monthly revenue of $8,000 plus additional payment for services beyond our fleet maintenance.
Frank stared at the number. $8,000 was more than he typically made in 3 months. That seems impossibly generous. It's market rate for corporate automotive contracts, Frank. The difference is that most shops who handle corporate accounts have multiple contracts and higher overhead costs. You'd be providing personalized service at a fair price. Alexandra scrolled through the document. We'd also establish a community service fund that would allow you to continue providing affordable repairs for neighborhood residents. Think of it as subsidizing your values instead of compromising them. And what would you need from me? Reliability, honesty, and the same level of care you've already shown us. We have 40 vehicles in our corporate fleet, plus approximately 60 employees who might need personal vehicle services. Nothing you couldn't handle with perhaps one additional mechanic? Frank felt his heart racing. The opportunity was everything he dreamed of, but also everything he'd learned to distrust. Alexandra, this feels too good to be true. In my experience, when something seems perfect, there's usually a catch. The catch is that you'd have to trust me, Alexandra said simply, and I'd have to trust you. Real partnerships require mutual faith, and that can be scary. Before Frank could respond, Lily and Zoe emerged from the practice room, both glowing with excitement. "Dad, did you hear me play?" Zoe asked, practically bouncing. "Lily taught me how to make music with a real violin." "I heard," Frank said, his throat tight with emotion. "You sounded beautiful." "Miss Alexandra, Lily told me that if I take lessons here, we could play duets together. Is that really possible?" Alexandra looked at Frank, her expression questioning. "That depends on what your dad decides about our partnership." Zoe looked between the adults, clearly sensing the weight of the moment. "Is this about the job thing? Because if Miss Alexandra is going to help us save Mommy's shop, that means I could take violin lessons?" "It's more complicated than that, sweetheart." "No, it's not," Zoe said with the clarity that only children possess. "She wants to help us, we want to help her, and everyone gets to do what they love. That's not complicated, that's just nice." Frank looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at Lily's encouraging smile, then finally at Alexandra's patient expression. For months, he'd been making decisions based on fear and scarcity. Maybe it was time to make one based on possibility. "Alexandra, I think we should discuss the details of this partnership more seriously." "Really?" Lily clapped her hands together. "Does this mean Zoe can come to my concert tonight as our official business partner?" "Lily," Alexandra laughed, "that's not exactly how business partnerships work." "But it's how friend partnerships work," Zoe said seriously, "and that's better anyway." As they walked toward the academy's exit, Frank realized that somewhere in the past week, his life had become intertwined with Alexandra and Lily's in ways he hadn't expected. The partnership they were discussing was about more than money or business contracts. It was about building something together that honored both his values and her resources. For the first time since Carmen's death, Frank felt like he was moving toward something, instead of just trying to survive each day. The question now was whether he was brave enough to embrace the change. Monday morning brought the first sign that Frank's potential new life wouldn't be without complications. He was installing brake pads for Carlos's food truck when a sleek black BMW pulled up outside his shop. The driver was a man in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit that screamed corporate authority, and he was definitely not there for automotive repairs. "Frank Ruiz?" The man approached with the kind of confident stride that suggested he was used to getting his way. I wiped his hands on his shop rag, immediately on guard. "What can I do for you, Mr.?" Sterling smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. "Actually, I'm here to do something for you. I understand you've received an interesting offer from Winters Technologies. Word travels fast in the business community, and I'd hate to see you make a decision you might regret." The comment sent a chill down Frank's spine. "I'm not sure what you mean." Sterling smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. Alexandra Winters has a reputation for, let's call them, impulsive business decisions, especially when they involve attractive single fathers who've caught her daughter's fancy. This wouldn't be the first time her personal feelings have clouded her professional judgment. Frank felt his jaw tighten. "I think you should leave." "Hear me out," Sterling continued, pulling out a manila folder. "I represent a consortium of investors who are very interested in this neighborhood. Prime location, excellent development potential. We're prepared to offer you $400,000 for this property. That's quadruple what you could get in the current market." "It's not for sale." "Everything's for sale, Mr. Ruiz. The question is price and timing. Because I'd hate for you to discover that Winters Technologies' offer isn't as secure as it appears." Before Frank could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "Richard, what an unpleasant surprise." Alexandra stood in the doorway of the shop, her expression ice-cold. She was dressed for business, in a sharp gray suit, but there was nothing professional about the anger in her eyes. "Alexandra," Sterling replied smoothly, "just having a friendly conversation with Mr. Ruiz about his options." "Funny, it doesn't sound very friendly from here," Alexandra said, moving to stand beside Frank, her presence both protective and possessive. "Especially since your consortium has been systematically intimidating small business owners throughout this neighborhood for the past 6 months. Sterling's facade cracked slightly. "That's a serious accusation."
It's a factual statement.
Mrs. Patterson told me about your visit to her laundromat. Carlos mentioned the pressure tactics at his restaurant. You've been offering money up front while quietly ensuring that anyone who doesn't sell faces permit problems, inspection issues, and mysterious zoning violations. Frank looked between them, realizing he'd stumbled into something much larger than a simple business negotiation. What's really going on here? Richard's investors want to buy up this entire block and turn it into luxury condos, Alexandra explained. They need every property owner to sell or their development plans fall apart. Your shop is one of the last holdouts. And now you've given him an alternative, Sterling said coldly. How convenient that Winters Technologies suddenly needs automotive services right after Ruiz's property becomes crucial to our timeline. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from an overheated engine. Frank felt something twist in his stomach, the seed of doubt that Sterling had intended to plant. You're suggesting that Alexandra's offer is somehow connected to your development plans? Frank asked slowly. I'm suggesting that Miss Winters has a history of mixing business with personal interests. Check the public records, Mr. Ruiz. Winters Technologies has a partnership with 3 different real estate development firms, including one that would benefit significantly if your property remained unavailable for our project. Alexandra's face went white. That's completely untrue, and you know it. Is it? Sterling pulled out his phone and showed Frank what appeared to be a business document. Winters Technologies has a consulting contract with Denver Development Group, signed last month. DDG happens to be our primary competitor for several downtown projects. Frank stared at the document, his mind racing. The timing was suspiciously convenient. Alexandra's car broke down right in front of the one shop that was holding up a major development project. Her daughter immediately decided she wanted to be Zoe's best friend. She offered him more money than he'd ever dreamed of making. You think I orchestrated all this? Alexandra's voice was barely controlled. You think I'm some kind of corporate manipulator who uses her daughter as bait for business deals? That I'd exploit your kindness and Zoe's affection for a real estate scam? The passion in her voice was convincing, but Sterling's words kept echoing in Frank's head. He'd seen what happened to people who trusted the wrong person in business. His own father had nearly lost everything to a partner who'd turned out to have ulterior motives. I need time to think, and I need to have these documents reviewed. Alexandra nodded stiffly. Of course, do whatever you need to do. But Frank, she paused at the door of the shop. When you're reviewing those documents, remember that everything I've told you about my feelings for you and my daughter's affection for Zoe is real. Whatever else you doubt, don't doubt that. After she left, Frank sat in his office staring at Sterling's folder. Inside were contracts, financial records, and what appeared to be a detailed analysis of property values in the neighborhood. The more he read, the more confused he became. His phone buzzed with a text from Carlos. Frank, you okay? I saw that Sterling guy at your shop earlier. He's bad news, man. What do you know about him? He came to my restaurant 3 weeks ago, offered to buy me out. When I said no, suddenly I had health inspectors showing up every other day. Fire marshal found violations that had never been problems before. My delivery truck got towed twice for parking in the same spot I've used for 5 years. Frank felt his stomach drop. Did he mention anything about Winters Technologies? Actually, yeah. He said I should be careful about getting involved with amateur real estate players who don't understand the neighborhood dynamics. Seemed to think Winters was somehow connected to the development stuff. After hanging up, Frank realized he was trapped between 2 powerful forces, each claiming the other as lying. Sterling represented obvious corporate intimidation, but Alexandra's offer did seem suspiciously convenient. The worst part was that Zoe and Lily were caught in the middle, their innocent friendship now tainted by adult suspicions and business complications. That evening, as Frank helped Zoe with her homework, she looked up from her math worksheet with concern. Dad, why do you look sad? Did something happen with Miss Alexandra? Frank struggled with how much to tell her.
Some business complications came up. Nothing for you to worry about. But I am worried, Zoe said seriously, because Lily called me after school and she was crying. She said some mean men came to your shop and made her mom upset. Lily called you?
Dad, Miss Alexandra isn't mean, is she? Because Lily really loves her mom, and I really love you. And we want our parents to be friends. Zoe's innocence in Frank's chest tightened. No, sweetheart, Miss Alexandra isn't mean. But sometimes grown-up situations are more complicated than they seem. But you still like her, right? Even if there are complications? Frank looked at his daughter's worried face, thinking about Alexandra's expression when Sterling had accused her of manipulation. Despite his doubts, his instinct was to trust her. The question was whether his instincts were reliable or clouded by attraction. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I still like her." "Good," Zoe said with relief, "because Lily's concert is tomorrow night, and she's really excited for us to be there. It would make her sad if we didn't come because of stupid grown-up complications." Frank realized that whatever was happening between him and Alexandra, the children's friendship was real and precious. Lily and Zoe deserved to have their bond protected from adult complications. "We'll be there," he promised. "Whatever else happens, we won't let complications hurt your friendship with Lily." As Zoe returned to her homework with a satisfied smile, Frank sat at his kitchen table, Sterling's documents spread before him. Tomorrow night's concert would be a test. Could he separate his doubts about business motives from his genuine feelings for Alexandra? And more importantly, could he trust his heart when his mind was full of questions? The medical collection notice still sat prominently on his table, a reminder that time was running out for simple solutions. One way or another, Frank would have to make a choice that would determine not just his financial future, but the kind of man he wanted to be for his daughter. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected visitor to Frank's shop. He was replacing the alternator on Mrs. Rodriguez's sedan when a woman in her 40s approached, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the kind of serious expression that suggested official business. "Mr. Ruiz, I'm Detective Maria Santos with the Denver Police Department's Economic Crimes Unit. I understand you've had some recent contact with Richard Sterling and his associates." Frank straightened up, his hands still greasy from the repair work. "Is there a problem?" "That depends. Has Mr. Sterling made any threats or offers regarding your property?" Frank wiped his hands slowly, considering his words. "He offered to buy my shop, said his clients were interested in developing the neighborhood." Detective Santos nodded, making notes. "What about pressure tactics? Suggestions that you might face problems if you didn't sell?" "Not directly, but he seemed to know things about my business situation that felt invasive." "Mr. Ruiz, I'm going to be direct with you. We've been investigating Sterling's consortium for several months. They're using a combination of legitimate business pressure and quasi-legal intimidation to force property sales. 3 other business owners in this area have filed complaints." Frank felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of intimidation?" "Fraudulent inspection reports, mysterious permit problems, harassment of customers. Nothing we can prove in court yet, but a clear pattern." Detective Santos looked around the shop. "The fact that Sterling approached you personally suggests your property is particularly important to their plans." "And what about Winters Technologies? Sterling suggested they might be involved somehow." Detective Santos consulted her notes. "We found no evidence connecting Winters Technologies to Sterling's activities. In fact, Miss Winters contacted our department yesterday to report Sterling's harassment of you. She provided documentation of her company's legitimate business practices and offered to cooperate fully with our investigation." Frank stared at the detective. "She called the police?" "She said Sterling was threatening someone she cared about, and she wanted to ensure you had all the facts." Detective Santos handed Frank her business card. "Mr. Ruiz, if Sterling or his associates contact you again, call me immediately. And be careful.
These people don't like to lose. After the detective left, Frank stood in his shop feeling even more confused than before. If Alexandra had contacted the police, it suggested she was genuinely concerned about his welfare. But it could also be a calculated move to appear helpful while covering her own involvement. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Carlos's name appeared on the screen. "Frank, you need to know something. That Sterling guy came back to my restaurant this morning with a city inspector. They're claiming my grease disposal system violates new environmental regulations that apparently went into effect yesterday." Yesterday? According to them. "Frank, I've been using the same disposal service for 8 years. Now suddenly it's illegal, and I'm facing a $5,000 fine unless I install a new system by Friday?" Frank felt anger building in his chest. "Carlos, call Detective Santos. I gave his friend the detective's number. She's investigating Sterling for exactly this kind of harassment." After hanging up, Frank realized the stakes had escalated beyond his personal situation. Sterling wasn't just pressuring him. He was systematically destroying the livelihoods of everyone who refused to sell. That afternoon, Frank was working under the hood of a customer's truck when he heard familiar voices outside. Through the bay door, he saw Zoe walking toward the shop with Lily and Alexandra. It was unusual for Zoe to come to the shop after school, and seeing Alexandra made his chest tighten with complicated emotions. "Dad, Miss Alexandra isn't mean, is she?" "Dad," Zoe called out as they entered. "Lily wanted to see where you work, and Miss Alexandra said she needed to talk to you about something important." Lily immediately began exploring the shop with the curiosity of a child who'd never seen a working garage. "Mr. Frank, this place smells like possibility." "Possibility?" Frank asked, amused, despite his tensions. "That's what my violin teacher says when something broken is about to become beautiful again."
Alexandra stood near the entrance, looking uncertain for the first time since Frank had known her. "Frank, I hope you don't mind us dropping by. After yesterday's confrontation with Sterling, I felt like we needed to clear the air. Actually, that works out. I had a visit from the police this morning. Detective Santos said you contacted them about Sterling." "I was worried about you," Alexandra said simply. "When someone threatens people I care about, I don't stand by and do nothing." "But that's just it, Frank," said his frustration finally breaking through. "I don't know if you care about me or if I'm just a convenient way to block Sterling's development plans." The words hung in the air between them. Zoe and Lily, who had been examining Frank's tool organization, both looked up at the tension in his voice. "Frank," Alexandra said quietly, "can we talk privately?" They moved to Frank's small office while the girls continued exploring the shop under Mrs. Patterson's watchful eye. She'd arrived to pick up her car and offered to supervise. "I understand why you're suspicious," Alexandra began. "Sterling is good at planting doubt and making innocent situations look calculated. But the timing, Alexandra. Your car breaks down right here, right when Sterling needs my property. Your daughter immediately bonds with mine. You offer me more money than I've ever made. How is that not calculated?" Alexandra was quiet for a long moment. "Do you want to know what really happened that day?" Frank nodded. "I was coming from a meeting with my lawyer about my custody arrangement with Lily's father. He's been trying to get increased visitation, claiming I work too much to be a proper mother." Alexandra's voice grew tight. "I was distracted, emotional, and I've been pushing my car's maintenance appointments because I was too busy proving I could handle everything perfectly." "Your ex-husband?" "He lives in California now. He left when Lily was 3 because he decided fatherhood was too complicated for his lifestyle." Alexandra looked out the office window at Lily, who was now helping Zoe organize wrenches by size, both girls giggling at Zoe's exaggerated, serious expression. "When my car broke down, I was terrified that missing Lily's violin lesson would be another mark against me as a mother." Frank felt something shift in his understanding. "And then I fixed your car for free. And then you fixed our car for free and treated Lily like she mattered and showed more genuine kindness in 30 minutes than her father has shown in 4 years." Alexandra met his eyes. "Frank, I didn't orchestrate meeting you, but I'm not sorry it happened." "What about the business connection Sterling mentioned?"
My company does have a consulting contract with Denver Development Group. We built their employee scheduling system last year, but DDG isn't involved in residential development. They focus on commercial properties downtown. Alexandra pulled out her phone and showed him the contract details. Sterling twisted the truth to make it sound suspicious. Frank studied the documents, feeling his doubts beginning to dissolve. Why didn't you explain this yesterday? Because I was hurt and angry that you'd think I was capable of using my daughter to manipulate you. And because I realized that if you could believe Sterling's accusations so easily, maybe I'd misread your feelings for me. Through the office window, they could see Lily teaching Zoe how to properly hold a wrench, both girls giggling at Zoe's exaggerated, serious expression. Alexandra, I've been burned before by people who seemed trustworthy. My father lost nearly everything to a business partner who turned out to be embezzling money. It made me cautious about offers that seemed too good to be true. I understand caution, Frank, but at some point you had to decide whether you're going to let fear make your decisions or trust your instincts about people. Frank looked at Alexandra, really looked at her. The worry lines around her eyes, the way she unconsciously smiled when watching our daughters together, and the genuine hurt in her expression when she talked about his doubts. My instincts tell me you're exactly who you appear to be, he said quietly. A woman trying to build something good while protecting her daughter and helping people she cares about. And what do your instincts tell you about us? About the possibility of building something together? Before Frank could answer, Lily appeared in the office doorway. Mr. Frank, Zoe and I have been talking and we think you and Mom need to stop being scared. Scared of what, sweetheart? Alexandra asked. Scared of being happy, Zoe said, joining Lily in the doorway. Because when grown-ups are scared, they make everything more complicated than it needs to be. Frank looked at his daughter's earnest face, then at Lily's determined expression, then finally at Alexandra's hopeful smile. You know what? I think they're right. I think I've been making this more complicated than it needs to be. Does that mean you're willing to trust me? Really trust me? Not just hope that I'm trustworthy? Frank stepped closer to her, close enough to see the gold flecks in her eyes. It means I'm willing to trust us, whatever that becomes. Even with Sterling trying to cause problems? Especially with Sterling trying to cause problems. Because if we let him scare us apart, he wins. Lily clapped her hands together. Does this mean Mr. Frank is coming to my concert tonight without any more worrying? It means, Frank said, looking at Alexandra, that we're done letting other people's agendas interfere with what we're building together.
As they prepared to leave, Alexandra caught Frank's hand. Thank you for giving us another chance. Thank you for not giving up on me when I let doubt cloud my judgment. Outside, Mrs. Patterson approached with her car keys and a knowing smile. Frank, that woman looks at you the way Carmen used to, like you're exactly the man she's been hoping to find. Mrs. Patterson. And those girls, they're already family. Don't let some corporate bully convince you otherwise. As Alexandra's car pulled away, Frank realized that Mrs. Patterson was right. What he felt for Alexandra and what he saw between their daughters wasn't something that could be manufactured or manipulated. It was real, and it was worth fighting for. The question now was whether he was ready to stop protecting himself from happiness and start building toward it instead. That evening, the Betcher concert hall glittered with the warm light of hundreds of chandeliers as Denver's philanthropic community gathered for the Children's Hospital benefit concert. Frank stood in the elegant lobby wearing his best shirt and tie, still feeling slightly out of place among the evening gowns and tailored suits, but no longer caring about fitting in. Beside him, Zoe practically vibrated with excitement in her navy blue dress, her eyes wide as she took in the grandeur of the venue. Dad, this place is like a palace, she whispered, clutching the small bouquet of flowers they'd brought for Lily. Do you think princesses really live here? I think tonight we get to watch a princess perform, Frank replied, spotting Alexandra and Lily near the reception area. Alexandra wore an elegant black dress that was both sophisticated and understated, but it was her smile when she saw them that made Frank's breath catch. Lily practically glowed in a midnight blue dress with silver accents, her violin case in one hand and sheet music in the other. Mr. Frank, Zoe, Lily called out, running toward them with careful steps to avoid tripping in her dress shoes. You made it! I was worried you might not come because of all the grown-up drama. We promised we'd be here,
Frank said, kneeling to her eye level, "and we never break promises to musicians." "Besides," Zoe added, presenting the bouquet, "we wanted to give you these good luck flowers." Lily's face lit up as she accepted the flowers. "They're perfect! Mom, can we put them in my dressing room?" "Of course, sweetheart, but first, let's find our seats. The concert starts in 20 minutes." As they made their way through the lobby, Frank noticed several people watching them with curious interest. He caught fragments of whispered conversations. "That's Alexandra Winters, the mechanic who fixed her car. Such a sweet story." "Are people talking about us?" he asked Alexandra quietly. "Lily may have told her violin teacher about our friendship, and her teacher may have mentioned it to some of the other parents. Apparently, the story of the guardian angel mechanic has become somewhat legendary among the academy families." They found their seats in the orchestra section, close enough to see the stage clearly. Zoe sat between Frank and Alexandra, while other parents and children filled the rows around them. The atmosphere was warm and supportive, more like a community celebration than a formal concert. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Children's Hospital Colorado Benefit Concert, featuring our talented young musicians. Tonight's performances will showcase not only their musical abilities, but their commitment to helping other children through the healing power of music." As the lights dimmed and the first performer took the stage, Frank found himself watching Zoe's face more than the show. Her wonder was complete and infectious, her small hands moving unconsciously as if she were conducting along with the music. "She's already composing in her head," Alexandra whispered. "I can see it in her expression." Halfway through the program, it was Lily's turn. She walked onto the stage with confidence that reminded Frank of her mother, positioned herself at the microphone, and waited for her accompanist to begin the introduction to Bach's Minuet in G. The first notes floated through the hall with crystalline clarity. Lily's technique was flawless, but more than that, she played with genuine emotion and joy. Frank felt his throat tighten as he watched this 7-year-old girl pour her heart into her music, sharing something beautiful with a room full of strangers. Beside him, Zoe sat transfixed, tears of pure happiness streaming down her cheeks. When Lily reached the final notes and held them with perfect control, the audience erupted in enthusiastic applause. "She's amazing," Zoe whispered to Frank. "Did you hear how she made the music tell a story?" After the concert, they met Lily backstage in the artist's reception area. She was still glowing from her performance, surrounded by other young musicians and their families. "Lily, you were incredible," Frank said, giving her a gentle hug. "That was the most beautiful Bach I've ever heard." "Really? Even better than the recordings Mom plays in the car?" "Better," Frank said seriously, "because it came from your heart." "Mr. Frank," said Lily, suddenly looking very grown up despite her young age, "can I ask you something important?" "Of course." "Are you going to marry my mom?" The question came out of nowhere, causing Alexandra to nearly choke on her champagne and several nearby conversations to pause. Frank felt every eye in their small circle turn toward him. "Lily," Alexandra began, her face flushing red, "that's not appropriate. But I need to know, because Zoe and I have been talking and we figured out some very important things."
Zoe stepped forward, clearly part of whatever plan the girls had hatched. "We made a list." "A list?" Frank asked, amused despite his embarrassment. Lily pulled out a folded piece of paper from her dress pocket. "A list of reasons why you and Mom should get married. Do you want to hear it?" "Girls, this really isn't the place." Alexandra tried again. "Actually," Frank said, his curiosity getting the better of him, "I'd like to hear this list." Lily unfolded the paper with ceremony. "Reason number 1, you both help people even when it's hard. Reason number 2, you both love us kids more than anything else in the world. Reason number 3, you make each other smile in ways that reach your eyes." "Ways that reach your eyes?" Frank repeated. "When adults fake smile, it only happens with their mouths," Zoe explained seriously. "But when you and Miss Alexandra look at each other, your whole faces light up. That's how you know it's real love." Reason number 4, Lily continued, you both think taking care of people is more important than making money. Reason number 5, you're both scared of the same things, which means you understand each other. What are we scared of? Alexandra asked, genuinely curious. You're scared of not being good enough parents, Zoe said matter-of-factly, and you're scared of trusting someone who might leave. But that's silly, because you're both excellent at taking care of people, and neither of you is the leaving type. Frank stared at his daughter, amazed by her insight. How do you know all this? Because we pay attention, Lily said simply. Adults think kids don't notice things, but we notice everything. We notice how Dad looks at Mom like she's the best thing that ever happened to him. We notice how Mom gets nervous happy when Dad texts her. We notice how you both try really hard to make sure we're okay with sharing our families. And here's the most important reason, Zoe added, taking the paper from Lily. Reason number 6, we're already a family. We just haven't made it official yet. The reception area had grown quiet around them. Other families had stopped their conversations to listen to the girls' presentation, and Frank could see several adults dabbing at their eyes. Girls, Alexandra said softly, what if Mr. Frank and I aren't ready to talk about marriage yet? Then you keep being ready, Lily said with the matter-of-fact wisdom that had become her trademark. But don't keep being scared, because being scared is what stops good things from happening. Frank looked at these two remarkable children who had somehow seen through all the adult complications to the simple truth underneath. Then he looked at Alexandra, whose eyes were bright with unshed tears and something that looked like hope. You know what? Frank said, kneeling down so he was at eye level with both girls. You two are absolutely right about everything. We have been scared, and we have been making things more complicated than they need to be. So, you'll stop being scared? Lily asked hopefully. Frank stood up and took Alexandra's hand, right there in front of everyone. I'll stop being scared if your mom stops being scared. Alexandra squeezed his hand, her voice slightly shaky. I think I can manage that. Does this mean you're going to get married? Zoe asked with the directness that had started this entire conversation. This means, Frank said, looking into Alexandra's eyes, that we're going to stop letting fear make our decisions, and we're going to see where courage takes us instead. But probably marriage, right? Lily pressed, because Zoe and I already picked out our bridesmaids' dresses. The laughter that erupted from the gathered crowd was warm and genuine. Frank realized that somewhere in the past few minutes, he'd stopped caring about the audience and started caring only about the 3 people who had become his world. Probably marriage, he agreed, causing Lily and Zoe to hug each other with victorious excitement. As they made their way out of the concert hall, Alexandra leaned close to Frank. Did we just get engaged by our daughters in front of half of Denver's social elite? I think we just got wisdom from our daughters about what really matters. Everything else is just details. Behind them, Lily and Zoe walked hand in hand, already deep in conversation about wedding planning and flower arrangements, as if they'd just solved the most obvious problem in the world. Which, Frank reflected, they probably had. Wednesday morning brought unexpected drama to the quiet neighborhood around Ruiz Auto Care. Frank was opening his shop for the day when he noticed 3 official-looking vehicles parked across the street: a city inspector's van, a fire department SUV, and Richard Sterling's black BMW. A small crowd of neighbors had already gathered, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. Frank, Mrs. Pattison called, out from her laundromat doorway, that Sterling man showed up 20 minutes ago with these city people. They're saying something about emergency safety inspections. Frank felt his stomach tighten as he watched Sterling direct 2 men in official uniforms towards his shop. This was exactly the kind of intimidation tactic Detective Santos had warned him about. Mr. Ruiz, one of the uniformed men approached him with a clipboard. I'm Inspector Davidson from the city's Environmental Safety Division. We've received reports of potential violations at your facility. We need to conduct an immediate inspection. What kind of violations? Frank asked, noting that Sterling stood just close enough to hear every word. Improper storage of automotive fluids, inadequate ventilation systems, and questions about your waste disposal permits. These are serious safety concerns that could result in immediate closure of your facility. Frank had been through enough inspections over the years to know that his shop was completely compliant with all regulations. Carmen had insisted on maintaining standards well above the minimum requirements. "I'd be happy to show you around," Frank said calmly. "My permits and safety documentation are in my office." As the inspection began, more neighbors gathered. Carlos emerged from his food truck, still dealing with his own fabricated violation. Mrs. Patterson stood with her arms crossed, glaring at Sterling with obvious disapproval. Even some of Frank's regular customers had stopped by, sensing that their trusted mechanic was under attack. 15 minutes into the inspection, a familiar black Audi pulled up to the curb. Alexandra got out, followed by a woman Frank didn't recognize, an older woman in a business suit who carried herself with unmistakable authority. "Frank," Alexandra called out, approaching with her companion, "I'd like you to meet Judge Patricia Caldwell. She's been investigating complaints about harassment of small business owners in this area." Judge Caldwell surveyed the scene with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Ruiz, I understand you've been experiencing some pressure to sell your property." "Among other things," Frank replied, gesturing toward the ongoing inspection. Sterling had noticed the judge's arrival and was attempting to maintain his composure, but Frank could see tension in his posture. "Richard," Judge Caldwell said, approaching Sterling with the kind of presence that commanded attention. "What a coincidence finding you here during another emergency inspection. That makes 4 businesses in 6 weeks." "Judge Caldwell," Sterling replied with forced politeness, "I'm simply observing public safety procedures. These neighborhood businesses need to maintain proper standards." "Interesting perspective," the judge said, pulling out a tablet, "because I've been reviewing the inspection reports from your previous visits. Remarkably similar violations reported at each location, all requiring expensive remediation that conveniently makes the properties less valuable." Frank watched as Inspector Davidson emerged from his shop, looking frustrated. "Mr. Ruiz, I need to apologize. Your facility is not only in full compliance, it exceeds safety standards in several areas. Someone appears to have filed a false report." "A false report?" Sterling interjected smoothly. "That's unfortunate. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding." "Mr. Sterling," Judge Caldwell's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, "I think it's time we discussed your understanding of legitimate business practices versus criminal harassment." The crowd that had gathered grew quiet, sensing the drama unfolding before them. Frank noticed that several people were recording the confrontation on their phones. "I'm not sure what you're implying," Sterling said, but his confident facade was beginning to crack. Alexandra stepped forward, her executive presence in full effect. "What Judge Caldwell is implying is that we have documented evidence of your systematic harassment campaign. False inspection reports, manufactured permit problems, and intimidation of business owners who refuse to sell to your consortium." She pulled out her own tablet and began reading. "Mrs. Patterson's laundromat, sudden grease trap violation reported 3 days after she refused your offer. Carlos Rivera's food truck, environmental compliance issues that mysteriously appeared after he declined to sell. And now Frank's shop, safety violations that don't actually exist. You can't prove any connection between my business interests and routine city inspections," Sterling said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Actually, we can," Judge Caldwell replied, her smile cold, "because your associate, Inspector Davidson here, has been very cooperative with our investigation." Inspector Davidson stepped forward, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Mr. Sterling, I can't continue falsifying reports. What you've been asking me to do is illegal, and I won't be part of it anymore." The admission sent a murmur through the gathered crowd. Sterling's face went pale as he realized his primary tool for harassment had just turned against him. "Furthermore," Judge Caldwell continued, "we have testimony from 3 other city employees who were pressured to participate in your scheme, forged documents, manipulated inspection schedules, and bribery attempts. Mr. Sterling, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and extortion." 2 police officers who had been waiting discreetly in an unmarked car stepped forward to place Sterling in handcuffs. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the man who had been terrorizing their neighborhood was led away. "You people don't understand the forces you're dealing with," Sterling called out as he was placed in the patrol car. Actually, Alexandra said, her voice carrying clearly across the street, we understand perfectly. We understand that bullies like you count on people being too scared or too isolated to fight back. But this community isn't isolated, and we're not scared. As the police car drove away, the crowd began to disperse, but not before several neighbors approached Frank to offer their support and congratulations. Frank, my boy, Mrs. Patterson said, patting his arm, I'm proud of you for standing up to that snake. Your Carmen would be proud too. Carlos emerged from the food truck with a tray of celebratory tamales. For everyone who stood with us against Sterling, he announced, community lunch on the house. As the impromptu block party developed around them, Frank found himself standing with Alexandra, Judge Caldwell, and Detective Santos, who had arrived during the arrest. How long had you been planning this? Frank asked. Since Monday, Alexandra replied. When Detective Santos told me about the investigation, I contacted Judge Caldwell's office. We've been building a case against Sterling for weeks, but we needed him to make a move that would prove the pattern. You used me as bait, Frank realized.
We gave you protection while documenting his illegal activities, Judge Caldwell corrected. Mr. Ruiz, Sterling's consortium has been destroying small businesses throughout Denver for over a year. Your willingness to stand firm gave us the evidence we needed to stop them. Detective Santos nodded. The inspector's testimony, combined with the documented harassment of your neighbors, gives us enough for multiple felony charges. Sterling won't be pressuring anyone for a very long time. Frank looked around at his neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson serving coffee to customers, Carlos distributing food, children playing in the small park across the street while their parents chatted and laughed. This was what Sterling had wanted to destroy, this sense of community and mutual support. What happens now? Frank asked. Now, Alexandra said, taking his hand, we build something better than what Sterling tried to tear down. Lily and Zoe came running up, having been dropped off by Alexandra's assistant during the excitement. Did we miss the part where the bad man got arrested? Lily asked breathlessly. You missed it, but you didn't miss the important part. What's the important part? Zoe asked. Frank looked at Alexandra, then at their daughters, then at the community celebrating around them. The important part is that good people working together are stronger than bad people working alone. And, Lily added with the wisdom that had become her trademark, bullies only win if everyone is too scared to be friends with each other. As the afternoon wore on, Frank realized that Sterling's defeat was about more than just protecting his shop. It was about proving that communities could defend themselves when they stood together, that small acts of kindness could grow into movements of resistance, and that sometimes the best way to fight darkness was simply to choose to be light. The medical collection notice was still sitting on his kitchen table at home, and the future was still uncertain in many ways. But for the first time since Carmen's death, Frank felt like he was part of something larger than his own struggle, a community, a partnership, and maybe even a new kind of family built on choice rather than chance. So, Alexandra said as they watched their daughters help distribute Carlos's tamales, now that we've defeated the villain, what's our next adventure? Frank smiled, thinking about all the possibilities that lay ahead. I think our next adventure is figuring out how to build something beautiful together. Starting with a wedding? Lily asked hopefully, appearing beside them with tamale sauce on her dress. Starting with tomorrow, and taking it one day at a time from there. Which, he realized, was exactly how the best adventures always began. 3 weeks after Sterling's arrest, Frank stood in the main conference room of Winters Technologies, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of downtown Denver. The contrast between this gleaming corporate environment and his grease-stained shop couldn't have been starker, yet somehow he felt perfectly at ease. Alexandra sat beside him at the polished conference table while her senior staff presented the final details of their partnership agreement. So the Automotive Services Division will operate as a subsidiary of Winters Technologies, but Ruiz Auto Care maintains complete autonomy over service standards, pricing for community customers, and hiring decisions. Frank nodded, still amazed by the arrangement they'd crafted. And the Community Service Fund? Fully endowed, confirmed Jennifer Martinez, the company's CFO.
$20,000 annually to subsidize repairs for neighborhood residents, plus funding for the automotive apprenticeship program you proposed. The apprenticeship program had been Frank's idea, a way to train young people from the community in automotive repair while preserving the values Carmen had instilled in the business. Alexandra had immediately embraced the concept, seeing it as perfectly aligned with Winters Technology's mission of supporting local communities. "The only remaining question," she said with a smile, "is whether you're ready to sign contracts that will officially make us business partners." Frank looked around the conference room at the faces of people who had become colleagues rather than strangers. Over the past 3 weeks, he'd gotten to know Alexandra's team, and they'd proven themselves to be genuine allies rather than corporate executives looking for profit opportunities. "I think I'm ready to sign," Frank said, reaching for the pen. As he signed the partnership agreement, Frank reflected on how much had changed since that evening when Alexandra's car had broken down outside his shop. What had started as a simple act of kindness had grown into something neither of them could have imagined, a business partnership that honored both his community values and her corporate resources. "Congratulations, partner," Alexandra said as Frank finished signing the documents. "Now comes the fun part, actually building this thing together." Later that evening, Frank and Alexandra sat on the porch of his apartment above the shop, watching Zoe and Lily practice violin in the small courtyard below. The girls had convinced Mrs. Patterson to let them use the laundromat's back area as their rehearsal space, and the elderly woman sat in a lawn chair, serving as their appreciative audience. "They sound better every day," Alexandra observed, listening to their attempt at a simple duet. "Lily's been a good teacher, and Zoe's got natural rhythm. Carmen would have loved hearing them play together." Alexandra reached for his hand. "Tell me about her, about Carmen." Frank was quiet for a moment, collecting his thoughts. Over the past few weeks, he'd shared bits and pieces of his history with Alexandra, but he'd never told her the complete story of his marriage.
"Carmen was the strongest person I knew," he began. "She built this business from nothing, convinced me to leave the Army and join her in Denver, taught me everything I know about cars and about treating people with dignity." "What was she like as a person?" "Stubborn as hell," Frank said with a soft laugh. "She once spent 3 days rebuilding an engine for an elderly customer who couldn't afford to go anywhere else. Refused to charge him more than parts cost, even though we needed the money ourselves." "She sounds like someone I would have liked." "She would have liked you too. Carmen always said that the measure of a person wasn't what they had, but what they did with what they had." Frank squeezed Alexandra's hand. "I think she'd approve of what we're building together." "Frank, can I ask you something that might be difficult?" He nodded. "Are you worried about honoring her memory while building a new life? Because I want you to know that I'm not trying to replace what you had with Carmen. I'm hoping to build something different alongside it." Frank turned to look at Alexandra directly. "For the first year after she died, I thought loving someone else would be a betrayal. But watching our daughters together, seeing how you care about this community, witnessing your integrity in business, I've realized that Carmen would want me to be happy. She'd want Zoe to have a mother figure who embodies the same values Carmen held. And what do you want? I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to teach our daughters that love multiplies instead of divides. I want to build a business that makes Carmen proud and a family that makes us all stronger." Before Alexandra could respond, Lily's voice floated up from the courtyard. "Mom, Mr. Frank, come listen to our new song." They climbed down from the porch to find the girls had arranged themselves like a formal concert duo, with Mrs. Patterson serving as their announcer. "Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the Ruiz Winters Musical Ensemble in their debut performance of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star with advanced harmonization." The performance was far from perfect. Zoe's fingering was still uncertain, and Lily occasionally had to pause to help her find the right notes. But the joy on both girls' faces was radiant. When they finished, Mrs. Patterson led the applause with enthusiasm. "Bravo! Encore!" Mrs. Patterson called out. "We don't know any other songs yet," Lily admitted.
"Then play that one again," Frank suggested. "It was beautiful." As the girls launched into their second performance, Alexandra leaned close to Frank. They really are becoming sisters. Just like their parents are becoming partners in everything that matters. "Speaking of which," Alexandra said, reaching into her purse, "I have something for you." She pulled out a small velvet box that made Frank's heart skip. But when she opened it, instead of a ring, it contained 2 keys on a simple keychain. "What are these?" "Keys to my house," Alexandra said. "I know we haven't talked about living arrangements, but I was hoping you and Zoe might consider making it official. Not just the business partnership, but the family partnership too." Frank stared at the keys, feeling the weight of the decision they represented. "Alexandra, are you asking me to move in with you?" "I'm asking you to build a home with me. Your shop is here, your community is here, so I thought maybe we could find a place in the neighborhood that's big enough for all of us. Somewhere close enough that Zoe doesn't have to change schools, but spacious enough that we can all have our own space when we need it." "You'd leave your house in Cherry Hills for this neighborhood?" "Frank, this neighborhood has something my house in Cherry Hills never had. A sense of community, people who care about each other, the feeling that you're part of something larger than yourself." Alexandra gestured toward the courtyard, where Carlos was setting up his mobile dinner service for the evening crowd. "This is where I want to raise Lily. This is where I want to build our life together." Frank looked around at the scene unfolding before them. Mrs. Patterson was teaching the girls how to bow properly after a performance. Carlos was offering samples of his newest taco recipe to anyone willing to try it. Several neighbors had gathered in the small courtyard, drawn by the music and the laughter. What about the business partnership? Mixing personal and professional relationships can be complicated. "Everything worthwhile is complicated," Alexandra replied. "But I'd rather navigate complications with you than avoid risks without you." Frank realized that Alexandra was offering him everything he'd been too afraid to hope for: partnership, family, community, and love, all integrated into one life. The scared part of him wanted to find reasons why it wouldn't work, but the part of him that had been shaped by Carmen's wisdom knew that some opportunities were too precious to refuse. "There's one condition," he said finally. "What's that?" "We do this right. Real engagement, proper wedding, full commitment to building something that lasts. Because our daughters deserve to see their parents choose love consciously, not just fall into it accidentally." "Is that a proposal, Mr. Ruiz?" "It's a promise, Ms. Winters. A promise that if we're going to do this, we're going to do it with our whole hearts." Their conversation was interrupted by Lily running up to them with excitement. "Mom, Mr. Frank, Zoe and I have been talking and we want to know when you're getting married so we can start planning." "Planning what?" Alexandra laughed. "Everything! The dresses, the flowers, the music, the food, where we're going to live, what we're going to call each other." Lily's enthusiasm was infectious.
"What are we going to call each other?" Frank asked. "Well, Zoe can't call you Mom because that's disrespectful to her real mom's memory," Lily explained seriously. "But she could call you Alexandra, or maybe Mama A, and I could call Mr. Frank Daddy Frank? Or maybe just Dad, if that's okay with everyone." Frank felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I think," he said carefully, "that we'll figure out what feels right as we go. But Lily, I would be honored if you wanted to call me Dad. And I'd be honored to be part of Zoe's life in whatever way feels comfortable to her," Alexandra added. As the evening wound down and neighbors began heading home, Frank found himself standing in the courtyard with Alexandra and both girls, feeling like his life had finally found its proper shape. The business partnership was official, the personal partnership was acknowledged, and the family they were building together felt both natural and intentional. "So," Alexandra said as they prepared to go inside, "tomorrow we start looking for a house big enough for our newly expanded family?" "Tomorrow," Frank agreed, "we start building everything we've been talking about." "Including the wedding?" Lily asked hopefully. Frank looked at Alexandra, seeing his own happiness reflected in her eyes. "Including the wedding." As they climbed the stairs to his apartment, Frank realized that Carmen had been right about one thing. Love really did multiply instead of divide. The love he'd shared with his first wife had not diminished his capacity to love Alexandra and Lily. Instead, it had prepared him to recognize and appreciate the gift he was being offered. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, and new adventures. But tonight, for the first time in years, Frank fell asleep knowing that he wasn't facing the future alone. 6 months later, the morning sun cast long shadows across the expanded Ruiz Auto Care and Community Training Center, its freshly painted sign gleaming in the Colorado dawn. The original building still stood proudly on Oakwood Street, but now it was connected to a modern facility that housed the Winters Technologies Automotive Division, creating a bridge between two worlds that had once seemed impossibly far apart. Frank arrived at 6 a.m., a habit he'd maintained even though he no longer needed to open alone. The parking lot that had once held only his beat-up pickup truck now accommodated a steady stream of vehicles, Winters Technologies fleet cars, neighborhood residents seeking affordable repairs, and apprentices arriving for the morning training session. "Early as always," Alexandra observed, emerging from her own car with 2 cups of coffee and the knowing smile that had become Frank's favorite way to start each day. She had made it a routine to stop by before heading to her downtown office, claiming she needed to check on the integration progress, but really just wanting to begin each morning with 20 minutes of normalcy before diving into corporate responsibilities. "Old habits," Frank replied, accepting the coffee and a quick kiss that still made his heart race after months of marriage. Besides, Lily and Zoe will be here in an hour for the Saturday Apprentice program, and you know how they like everything perfect for their students. The Saturday program had been Lily's idea, naturally. She'd convinced both parents that elementary school children should have the opportunity to learn basic automotive skills alongside computer programming. Cars and computers both have systems, she argued with the logic that made her famous among Denver's social elite. Kids should understand how both kinds of systems work. Through the shop windows, Frank could see Mrs. Patterson setting up the community breakfast area, another innovation born from the children's practical wisdom. People work better when they're not hungry, Zoe had noticed after noticing that some apprentices skipped meals to afford bus fare. The breakfast program, funded by Winters Technologies but run by neighborhood volunteers, had become an unexpected community gathering point. "How's the expansion coming?" Alexandra asked, nodding toward the construction crews already at work. "Ahead of schedule, thanks to having customers who actually pay their bills. Turns out corporate accounts are more reliable than hoping Mrs. Rodriguez can afford her brake pads this month." The Winters Technologies partnership had transformed everything, but not in the ways Frank had initially feared. Instead of losing his shop's character, the corporate backing had amplified it. The neighborhood customers still received the same caring service, but now it was subsidized by corporate profitable contracts. The apprentice program had evolved into a pipeline for skilled mechanics who understood both technical excellence and community responsibility. "Speaking of paying bills," Alexandra said, pulling out an envelope. "This came to the corporate office yesterday. I think you'll find it interesting." Frank opened the envelope, finding a handwritten letter on expensive stationery. "Mr. Ruiz, my name is Patricia Harrison, and I'm the Executive Director of the Colorado Small Business Foundation. We've been following your stories since that remarkable evening at the Children's Hospital Benefit Concert, and we'd like to offer you our Entrepreneur of the Year award. But more importantly, we'd like to partner with you to replicate the Ruiz model throughout Colorado. We have identified 15 communities where local automotive businesses are facing similar pressures from development and corporate consolidation. Would you be interested in consulting on a statewide program to preserve neighborhood businesses while expanding their capabilities through corporate partnerships? The compensation would be considerable, but I suspect that's not what will interest you most. We're talking about saving dozens of family businesses and creating hundreds of jobs for skilled mechanics who believe in serving their communities. Please call me at your convenience. Sincerely, Patricia Harrison. P.S. My granddaughter was at the benefit concert that night. She's been telling everyone she meets about the mechanic who married the princess because they both love helping people. Children have a way of getting to the heart of things, don't they?
Of things, don't they? Frank looked up to find Alexandra watching his reaction with barely contained excitement. "You knew about this?" "Patricia called me last week to verify some details about our partnership structure. I may have provided extensive documentation about the success metrics." Alexandra's professional mask slipped into a proud smile. "Frank, they want to use what you've built here as a template for community business preservation across the entire state." Before Frank could fully process the implications, familiar voices erupted from the parking lot as Lily and Zoe arrived with Carlos, who'd volunteered to drive them to the Saturday session. "Dad, Mom," Zoe called out, running toward them with the boundless energy that had returned as her confidence grew. "Lily has an announcement." Lily practically skipped over, wearing a t-shirt that declared Future Automotive Engineer, a gift from her newest role model, Detective Santos, who had become the program's legal advisor and Frank's unexpected mentor in business development. "Guess what?" Lily announced without preamble. "Miss Patricia from the Music Academy wants Zoe to audition for the Colorado Youth Orchestra Summer Intensive. And the Automotive Academy wants me to design a computer program that helps diagnose engine problems. And Mrs. Patterson's granddaughter is coming from California to visit, and she wants to learn both violin and car repair." The rapid-fire announcement was pure Lily, enthusiastic, inclusive, and somehow managing to weave everyone's dreams together into a single narrative of possibility. "And," Zoe added with the dramatic timing she'd perfected over months of living in a blended family with Lily, "we have a surprise for you." The two girls exchanged conspiratorial looks before Lily pulled out her phone and began playing a video. On the screen, a familiar news reporter stood in front of Ruiz Auto Care and Community Training Center. 6 months ago, this corner housed a struggling auto repair shop facing closure. Today, it's home to one of Colorado's most innovative workforce development programs, where corporate resources meet community needs to create something neither could achieve alone. The video showed the morning apprentice session in action, teenagers and adults learning side by side, corporate executives getting their hands dirty alongside neighborhood residents, and at the center of it all, Frank teaching both technical skills and ethical business practices to a diverse group of eager students. But perhaps most importantly, the reporter continued, it's a story about how one man's simple act of kindness created ripple effects that transformed not just his own life, but an entire community's understanding of what success can look like. The video concluded with interviews from various apprentices, neighborhood residents, and Winters Technologies employees, all describing how the program had changed their lives. Mrs. Patterson appeared on screen, her English more confident than ever. "Frank always say, when you fix car, you fix person's life. Now we fix many lives together." "When does this air?" Alexandra asked, clearly seeing it for the first time. "Tonight," Lily said proudly. "Channel 9 is doing a special report on community business success stories. We're the featured segment." As if summoned by the mention of media attention, Judge Caldwell's familiar sedan pulled into the parking lot. She'd become a regular weekend visitor, officially monitoring the program's compliance with various legal requirements, but really just enjoying watching justice work in practical ways. "Frank," she called out, approaching with a newspaper under her arm. "Have you seen the morning paper?" She unfolded the Denver Post to reveal a front-page story headlined, "From Broken Down to Building Up, How Love and Auto Repair Transformed a Denver Neighborhood." The article featured a large photo of Frank and Alexandra at their wedding 3 months earlier, surrounded by both their corporate colleagues and their neighborhood family. Lily and Zoe were prominently featured, described as the matchmaking masterminds whose innocent wisdom helped create one of Colorado's most successful public-private partnerships. "There's more," Judge Caldwell continued with obvious satisfaction. "Richard Sterling was sentenced yesterday, 3 years federal prison for fraud and conspiracy. His associates got 2 years each. But here's the best part. The judge ordered their seized assets to be used for a small business preservation fund." Lily clapped her hands together. "So they have to use their mean people money to help nice people like Dad." "Exactly like that," Judge Caldwell confirmed with a smile. As the morning progressed and the apprentice session began, Frank found himself standing in the same spot where he'd first encountered Alexandra's broken-down Audi. The view was dramatically different now, bustling activity where there had once been quiet desperation, laughter and learning where there had been worry and isolation. Alexandra appeared beside him, having delayed her departure for the office to watch the morning's activities. "Any regrets?" she asked softly. Frank looked around at the scene unfolding before them. Livy was explaining computer diagnostics to a group of fascinated teenagers, while Zoe demonstrated how mechanical systems connected to dance movements. Mrs. Patterson was serving breakfast to apprentices and corporate executives with equal warmth. Carlos was teaching restaurant management skills to aspiring entrepreneurs. Judge Caldwell was helping a young veteran navigate small business licensing requirements.
But below the statistics, in Lily's careful handwriting, was the metric that mattered most to both girls. Best friends forever. 2 new sisters, 2 happy parents who love each other, 1 community that believes in helping each other too, many smiles to count. And Zoe had added, pointing to the bottom of the board, "We added something special for today." At the very bottom, in both girls' handwriting, was a new line. Proof that 1 broken-down car can fix a whole world. As Frank wrapped his arms around his wife and both their daughters, he thought about the chain of events that had led to this moment. A broken thermostat, a little girl's innocent wisdom, a woman brave enough to trust a stranger, and a community willing to believe that small kindnesses could create large changes. Carmen's voice seemed to whisper in the morning breeze. "Every repair fixes more than just a broken part, Frank. Sometimes it fixes everything." In the distance, a familiar sound caught his attention, the distinct note of an engine in distress. A sedan was pulling over on Oakwood Street, steam rising from under its hood. A worried-looking driver was getting out to assess the situation. Lily heard it too, and was already heading toward the street with her toolkit, a miniature version of her stepfather's, complete with diagnostic computer. "Don't worry," she called to the stranded driver. "Ruiz Auto Care fixes everything, and we're really good at helping people." Frank started to follow, but Alexandra caught his hand. "Let her handle the first diagnosis," she suggested with a smile. After all, she learned from the best. Watching his stepdaughter approach the stranded motorist with confidence and compassion, Frank realized that the story that had begun with his simple act of kindness wasn't ending. It was just beginning its next chapter, with Lily and Zoe carrying forward the values he and Alexandra had chosen to build their lives around. Some stories, he thought, are too good to ever really end. They just keep getting better. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from our channel.